Sinkholes. You don't know about sinkholes, do you? You seen sinkholes? Hopefully you haven't been in a sinkhole. We have naturally occurring sinkholes in this state, northwest Georgia, southwest Georgia. They all have to do with the geology and what's underneath, what kind of rock do you have underlying the area in a large sense. So our main natural sinkhole territories to karst terrain, that's essentially limestone. It's going to be value rich, and you have Doherty Plain right down there. That's essentially, continuation of North Georgia. The big feature there is the North Florida aquifer. It just kind of goes into southwest Georgia there. And if you ever taste the water in Florida in some parts, it tastes horrible. And it's just simply the source of it. It has a lot of, it's a limestone rock and the minerals from it. That makes that water not all that pleasant to drink. But these are naturally occurring problems. This is Mount Berry Square Mall in Rome. This is a few years back. But this sinkhole opened in the detention pond. Very fortunate. I don't know how you would feel about having all that water going, loosey-goosey somewhere it's not supposed to go. But there you are. That's what that looks like. And simply what happens with limestone is this is why you have caverns. That's why you have Ruby Falls. Locally, you have Carlsbad Cavern. Kentucky, you have all kinds of caverns going on. It's the carbonate rock and the slightly acidic nature of the water that eats away the geologic time and creates these big spaces. Well, depending on where you are, that can be a problem. If you have a building close to it, a road, structure, that kind of stuff, it can be a real problem. This is manufacturing plant. I think this is Jefferson Southern in Rockmart. And this is one of the site was first being developed. We were on site, and this was a standing pit. Like when you get steel and you make car parts out of it, it's a big 3,000-ton press. We were going to put piles to support that because you're stamping car parts, and you want that to be fairly stable. You don't want things to be moving while you're doing all of this. So we figured, okay, some piles, we need to do that, make sure that everything stays where it's supposed to be. Except you see what's happening with those piles. Some of them are low, some of them are refusing high. And what happens with limestone is you get a phenomenon called pinnacle limestone, where you have incredibly jagged surface, and you can have piles that go 20 feet, you move 5 feet away and go 60 feet. You hit a slot, you hit discontinuities, you hit a void, and that's what we were seeing here. Well, overnight, we had some rain, about 6 or 8 feet of water. This thing flushed like a commode. All the water went through that hole. The solution for this was to take all the overburden out, expose the rock, put about 300 yards of concrete on top of it, and then put your press. That's what you're going to do. It's a risk of living and building where you have this sort of geology. So it's tough sometimes because everybody wants to put nature in a box, like you're buying toilet paper or steel beams or anything. It doesn't fit. You have to deal with what you have. And as much as we try to come up with properties and parameters and design envelopes and all of that, it's a natural material, and it has it'll surprise you sometimes. This is a good one. What's happening there is this whole area is sitting on about 50 feet of blast rock debris. And it had about 8 or 10 feet of soil cover. And for the longest time, this wasn't an issue. It had been there forever. Nobody knew what was there. It was good ground, buildings, all kinds of things. Except this is a real wet period. You have downspouts, everything drains right through that little grass area there. When we start digging around and doing some drilling and doing a little bit of research, what we found is that we have a whole lot of rock fill. What's wrong with that? Well, nothing, until things don't work. What is rock fill? If you imagine, you have lots of open spaces there. It may be stable. You put some water, you let that communicate, and then all of a sudden, all that soil is washing into those open spaces. Imagine a jar full of marbles. So that breached, and then you have water dragging all the soil with it. And that was the source of that sinkhole. What happened here? Take it out, put a membrane down, separate the whole thing, and regrade it. And that's essentially what the solution was. But when you see sinkholes around here, it's all kinds of problems. You may remember this one. This is near here. We were called real quick when this happened. Went to look at it, and what you think's going on there?
Abandoned mine
shed?
shed?
Other than the TV people here.
Abandoned mine shed?
Yes, yes. After doing a little bit of research and convincing the city that no, your road's not going to cave in, what we found is that in this area, there used to be, or this was a prospect, it wasn't really a mine. It was just somebody started a shaft and didn't pan out, abandoned, there you are. Pyrite mine. Used to be fool's gold. Well, what you get out of that is sulfur. But that was, when we did the research, that's what we found. Otherwise, nice subdivision. Poor lady at the house, she was going through the divorce, so I mean, this wasn't really a good time for her. But anyway, the hole was fixed, backfilled with some good aggregate, and that was the end of that. But it made it on TV. I was really excited for a couple of days.
I remember that.
This here's more sinkholes. This is drainage related. This is a drain pipe that's breached, broken, and it swallowed up the pavement. What happens with that? It starts undermining, and you don't see it until that cover is weak enough and you get something going on there all by itself, by its own weight, and it collapses. So that's another mechanism for sinkholes. Probably the more typical one related to utilities is what we see right here. That is a very infamous one. Orm Street, right there by Tech. That's 14th Street. And that was a real horrible case. That was twin 90-inch sewer lines down below. And it just swallowed cars and a couple of people, and it was really bad. And what you see there is geogrid that was used to stabilize that subgrade to allow paving. And in retrospect, that probably made the problem show up later than it could have, because all that grid reinforcement was just simply kind of holding that ground until it finally went catastrophically, rather than having the effect show up earlier and sort of alert. That's the problem with things sometimes when they happen suddenly. If things start to creep and it looks bad, people typically will stay away. But if you don't have a good clue as to any signs of anything going on, that's when you get people hurt. So that was a mess. We worked on that after everything was said and done, just backfilling it and redoing it. And then you'll see this on TV now and again, cars dropping out, all of that. And that's just your aging pipe, infrastructure, sewers, storm drains, water supply, all that stuff. All the not very sexy things that we need to spend money on that we don't enough. And it happens everywhere. It's not just here in North Carolina. I mean, you see it everywhere. And it's simply things wear out, pipes leak, and if you have the right conditions, you start creating this sort of thing. Luckily, it's not as often as everybody wants to think, but when it happens, it's pretty spectacular.